She called the cops while I was planting a tree with my wife's name carved in the wooden sign at its base. Name's Harlan Voiles. Been treasurer of this HOA for 7 years. Didn't say a word, just handed the officer a folder inside my signature on every landscaping check she ever approved. Ever seen someone lose an argument they started with a phone call? I was halfway through digging the hole when she came stomping across the lawn, phone in hand, jaw locked like a bulldog. She didn't ask. She didn't warn. She just called 911 because I was planting a tree. I paused long enough to set the spade upright and lean on it like a cane. The bark chip mulch had already started to steam in the morning light, a soft cloud rising above the freshly dug soil. The bald cypress sat nearby, and its burlap roots curled in patient silence. It had taken me a week to choose it. Martha always loved trees that outlasted arguments. Karen Boymel didn't stop at the edge of her property line. She never did. Her shoes were clean white like everything she wore, pressed precise, overconfident. She held a folded HOA handbook in one hand and her phone in the other, pointed toward me like a moral compass. "You can't just alter the landscape without filing a grounds modification request," she barked, her voice sharp enough to bounce off the vinyl siding. "That section is communal easement. You're trespassing." I didn't answer. Instead, I bent down and placed the small oak marker into the earth near the hole. Just a single name burned into the grain with a wood-burning pen: Martha. Still here. Karen didn't look at the sign. She never asked about it. Instead, she snapped a photo of me to shovel the tree, then turned back toward the street. "Don't go anywhere," she snapped, tapping at her phone. "I'm calling the police." I went back to digging. 10 minutes passed before a patrol car rolled into the cul-de-sac. It hummed low, respectful, as if even it knew this was overkill. Officer Tomley stepped out slowly, adjusting his belt. I recognized him from the mailbox break-in 2 years ago. Young face, tired eyes, clipboard always half full. Karen flagged him like a traffic warden. "He's creating an obstruction on common grounds," she said. "This is the 3rd time we've had non-compliant behavior." Tomley nodded, not writing yet. "Has there been a physical altercation?" "No, but he's ignoring the HOA guidelines. That's a violation." The officer turned to me. "Sir, I'm planting a tree," I said quietly. He looked at the small sapling behind me, then at the bare lawn. "You a resident here for 19 years." He made a small note. "Is this your yard?" "Technically, it's in my quadrant. That corner has always been mine to mow." He flipped a few pages. "All right. I'll file this as a neighborhood disturbance. No action needed, but HOA can follow up with written notice." Karen's mouth twitched like she wanted to object, but she didn't. Instead, she turned and walked off without a goodbye. Tomley nodded once more to the tree, then to me. "Nice choice. Cypress, right?" I just nodded. He got back in the car and drove off. The silence returned as quickly as it had been broken. I finished planting the tree with careful hands, tamping down the earth, circling the base with mulch. No rush. Trees hate speed. Then I took the oak sign and planted it firmly into the ground next to the roots. The lettering wasn't fancy. Just her name. Martha. No dates, no explanations, no need. By evening, the breeze had shifted. I sat out on the porch with a lukewarm cup of coffee when the notification came in. The subject line glared at me from the inbox: "Immediate compliance required. Tree obstruction notice, not 1448B." I didn't open it. Not then. Instead, I turned on the porch light just enough to see the cypress swaying in the dark. Still here. I didn't reply to the email. I just printed it, highlighted the line that said unauthorized planting, and slid it into a manila folder. The paper hissed as it emerged from the printer, still warm, still arrogant. The study was cold that morning. Not from weather, it was May, and the sun had already found the upper trim of the windows, but from the silence that settles when you stop expecting fairness. The coffee on my desk had gone cold, the surface smooth and gray like slate. I stared at the folder. It already had a label: 2023. Q2, Grounds. I added the new printout beneath a photocopy of the HOA community map. That northeast corner, my corner, was marked faintly in yellow. We'd color-coded it last year for the board presentation. Karen had signed off on it herself. Her initials were in the margin, I remembered. Above the back door, the security camera blinked red. I had wired it myself when Martha's balance started going early stages of tremor, the neurologist had said. No footage of Karen yesterday. She'd stayed just outside the frame. Typical. I clicked into the HOA member portal. Username H. Voiles. Password Martha 1979. The budget archive loaded slowly, like it resented being summoned on a Sunday. Tables of line items scrolled past mulch, snow removal, lighting, maintenance. I searched North Quadrant and filtered to 2022. There it was, item 104B, Re-landscaping North Quadrant, $12,500. Authorized by H. Voiles. I clicked View Details. Up came the PDF, time-stamped March 14, 2022. I had signed it just after the spring meeting. Karen had seconded the motion. She'd praised the proposal. The cursor hovered over the download button when my phone buzzed. Uncle H. It was Esri. Morning. I just saw the notice. They flagged Martha's tree. Are you kidding me? I printed it. You didn't reply. Some people shout. I document. She paused. I'm coming over. 15 minutes later, she was in my kitchen sweatshirt, halfway zipped hair, and a loose-bun laptop already open. This is nuts, she muttered, pulling up the same budget archive I had. Wait here. Item 104B. She clicked, then turned to me. That's your signature, Uncle H. I nodded. You're literally funding the lawn she's calling the cops over. She's calling the cops on her own appropriation. Esri grinned only for a second. Then she opened a screenshot tool. Let's get this clean, she said. Timestamp. Name, PDF, trail. If they're going to throw the book, we'll show them who wrote it. We went through the digital records together. I pulled up invoices. She pulled HOA meeting notes from her email. I showed her an old expense approval from 2021, $4,800 for perimeter tree regrading. Same quadrant, same chair, me. The folder thickened. Each printout had a yellow post-it. Exhibit B, Exhibit C, dates, signatures, labels. The hum of the printer became background music to the truth. Esri looked at me across the stack of documents. You realize if we push this, she can't say she didn't know. Not after signing these. She'll try. But she won't win. I clicked print on the last file, HOA Funds Authorization Form, bold and clear. Signed, Treasurer H. Voiles. I stapled it to the front of the folder and pressed a post-it on top Exhibit A. Still no yelling. Just paper ink and the quiet momentum of the inevitable. The red HOA sticker now flapped in the wind like a warning. It had been slapped against the cypress bark that morning, half peeling, half defiant. The same wind once lifted Martha's hair right there as she trimmed roses in her sun hat and whispered about how trees carried memory. Now it carried enforcement notices. I sat on the back porch with the second letter in hand. Unlike the first, this one came with teeth. Notice of non-compliance. Tree must be removed within 72 hours to avoid penalty assessment. It sounded more like an eviction than a landscaping order. I didn't crumple it. Instead, I flattened the page against my knee, smoothed the creases, and read the fine print. Common grounds interference. Unauthorized modification. Violation of subsection 6.2b. Martha had hated fine print. She always asked me to read it for her, said it gave her a headache. I didn't mind. She trusted me to read it the way it was meant, not the way it could be twisted. I opened my laptop and began the slow trawl through the HOA archive. Not the budget portal this time, but the minutes. Full meeting transcripts. I filtered by date 2021. March, the spring session. The same month Karen had pitched an expansion of the landscaping fund. I remembered because that was the year we had argued about whether to reseed the northeast quadrant. Her words were there typed by the secretary. The northeast quadrant deserves visual harmony consistent with our community standards. I leaned back. That was Martha's corner, our corner, the one I mowed every week. The one Karen now claimed was communal, but back then it had been useful to her to justify a budget increase. I had even seconded the motion, foolishly thinking it would bring in more shade, more trees, more peace. My inbox pinged. Another automated message from HOA. Please confirm compliance via photo upload once removal is completed. Below it was a blank field. Upload evidence. I closed the laptop. Outside, the wind carried the smell of cut grass and distant barbecue. A quiet shuffle drew my eye. Revi Maywell walked past the hedge, a small woman in orthopedic sneakers holding a reusable grocery bag. She paused as she passed the tree. Her eyes lingered on the red sticker, then on the wooden marker. Her lips moved slightly like she might say something. But she didn't. She looked at me. I nodded once. She gave the faintest shrug, like someone remembering something or choosing silence over conflict. Then she walked on. I watched her go. Revi had been a nurse for decades. She'd tended to Martha's knees after the second fall. She knew what that space meant. But in HOA territory, silence was often the safest language. Back inside, I opened the PDF of Karen's 2021 proposal. The phrasing was clear. Residents along the northeast perimeter have expressed desire for continuity with surrounding lots. That resident had been me, and that desire was now being turned against me. Esri's voice echoed in my head. She can't say she didn't know. I highlighted the paragraph and clicked forward. To Esri Gellhorn. Subject: thought you'd appreciate this attachment. Landscaping proposal, March 2021. PDF. No message in the body. Just the document. Some people fight with their fists. I use their own words. Esri's fingers tapped against the keys steady and fast while the rain drummed a quiet rhythm overhead. The laptop's glow cut through the kitchen's gloom, casting soft reflections off the stack of budget reports between us. Outside, the wind flared briefly, snapping the corner of the HOA notice still taped to the back porch door. I watched her highlight line after line, each signature, each approval, like a surgeon tracing old scars. Uncle H. She murmured, "This isn't negligence. It's deliberate." I said nothing because there was nothing left to say. The documents were there, the dates, the totals. $38,254, every dollar a nail in the case. We weren't building a defense. We were exhuming a truth they wanted buried. She pulled up the check ledger from last spring and pointed. Line 17, tree replacement, Zone B. I recognized the quadrant even before I read the coordinates. Martha's tree wasn't just a symbol now. It was a receipt. Esri clicked into the HOA bylaws and scrolled fast, her brow furrowed. "Here," she said, tapping the screen. "Any member who contributes more than $2,000 per year toward capital improvements may contest board rulings in open forum." Page 47, I muttered. Subsection F. She glanced over at me. "You know this by heart. I wrote half of it, remember?" She smirked. I thought that was just family lore. The printer whirred to life as she cued the files. Invoices signed, requests meeting, transcripts. We labeled each one. Exhibit A, Exhibit B. The folder thickened by the minute. When she opened Karen's recent submission dated just 6 months ago, we both leaned in. The file name read, Emergency Sod Expansion, North Quadrant. Same space, I whispered. Same logic. She's building a case against her own precedent. Esri sat back, arms folded. They're about to realize paper beats policy. The storm outside crackled. Lightning flashed behind the blinds. We saved every file to a flash drive. I slid it across the table. She labeled it in bold, Sharpie defense, Martha Grove. As the final document printed Karen's request from October, her signature neat and curved at the bottom, Esri placed it at the top of the stack. "You're not going in as some grumpy resident," she said. "You're the man who signed the checks." And suddenly I remembered Martha standing barefoot in this same kitchen years ago, pointing at the corner of the yard through the rain and saying, "It'll grow just fine, Harlan. All it needs is some roots." Now we had roots. Now we had proof. Karen stepped to the podium like she'd rehearsed every word in front of a mirror. Her blazer was immaculate navy with sharp shoulders, and she held a crisp manila folder like it was the HOA Constitution itself. I took a seat in the back row and waited. The Elmcroft Pines Community Hall smelled faintly of lemon floor cleaner and old water jugs. Metal chairs squeaked as 30-some residents shifted their weight. A projector hummed softly. Esri's face was visible in the top right of the Zoom screen. Muted arms, folded eyes, razor sharp. The HOA president, a retired tax attorney named Nolan Fess, cleared his throat. Next item, residential landscaping compliance, northeast quadrant. Karen nodded and stepped forward. She clicked the clicker in her hand. Slide 1 appeared a photo of my bald cypress. The red HOA sticker gleamed like blood against the bark. This, she said, voice smooth, is an unapproved alteration located on common grounds. She advanced to slide 2, an excerpt from the HOA code. Article 4.2 prohibits any resident from independently modifying shared visual zones without prior board consent. A murmur stirred in the crowd. The man beside me leaned over. "About time someone cleaned up these yards," he muttered. He didn't know I had signed off the budget that landscaped his. Karen continued. "When policies are ignored, the integrity of our community aesthetic is at risk." I watched her lips move, her eyes scan the room for agreement. Some board members nodded. Others looked down at their copies. When she finished, Nolan looked at me. "Mr. Voiles, you requested to speak?" I stood slowly. My knees cracked, but I didn't wince. I walked forward, the folder in my hand, light but heavy with implication. I didn't look at Karen. I placed the folder on the table in front of the board and opened it. I didn't speak, not yet. Instead, I laid out 3 signed approvals. One for a 2021 Regrade 1 for the 2022 Drainage Sod Project, and one for the 2023 Perimeter Tree Continuity. Each one bore my signature as treasurer. Next, I presented a copy of HOA Policy Clause 9. 4. Donors contributing over $2,000 annually toward approved projects may contest rulings in open forum. I turned to Nolan and spoke at last. "I have exceeded that threshold for 3 consecutive years." Karen stiffened. Her mouth opened, but Nolan raised a hand. "Ms. Boymel, please wait." I continued. "All documents are dated, notarized, and logged in the HOA's own finance portal." Someone in the audience leaned forward. A chair squeaked. Revi Maywell sat 3 rows back, fingers pressed to her lips. Then Karen broke in. "You don't get special treatment just because you wrote a check," she snapped. I didn't respond. Esri unmuted. "Mr. Chair," she said, her voice clear and cool through the speakers, if I may. Nolan glanced at Karen, then nodded. Briefly. Esri shared her screen. An email opened. Karen's own words dated October 2022, requesting emergency sod expansion to enhance the most visible green zone northeast quadrant. There was a pause. No one moved. Esri scrolled further. A sentence stood out in bold. "This space anchors our neighborhood's curb appeal. We should invest more into it, not less." Karen's face drained of color. Nolan looked down. He didn't speak. Revi looked at me. I nodded once. Her eyes softened. Then it came. A single clap. It echoed sharp, unintended. A man in the back, probably realizing too late what he'd done, but no one scolded him. No one laughed. Nolan cleared his throat. "We'll recess for review." I stepped back to my chair. Karen remained standing. Esri smiled from the Zoom window, tight, restrained, but real. When the board returned from recess, their expressions were different. Less legal. More embarrassed. Nolan Fess avoided eye contact. Karen, for the first time, sat instead of stood. The hum of the overhead lights filled the silence. Someone cleared their throat. A water jug gurgled. The tension had thinned, but hadn't disappeared. I glanced toward the projector screen. At some point, Esri had added a final slide. A photo of the Martha Grove sunlight dappled across fresh soil, the wooden sign at its base etched with Martha's name. Pink blossoms framed the background like an apology from the season. Karen saw it too. Her eyes lingered longer than she meant them to. Nolan stood. "We've reviewed all documentation submitted by both parties." Clause 9.4 of the HOA bylaws concerning donor privileges was overlooked in earlier interpretations. His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "We acknowledge that Mr. Voiles' contributions totaling over $30,000 in the past 3 years grant him the right to landscape within the scope of prior board approvals." A rustle moved through the room. A few heads nodded. Karen stood slowly, her hands clasped at her waist. There was confusion, she said. The files weren't easily accessible. The system, the system, someone whispered from the crowd. She blinked, lips pressing thin. But she didn't argue. A tall man rose from the second row, white shirt, bolo tie, voice like weathered cedar. Mr. Felden. He had lived here since the subdivision was dirt roads and numbered lots. "I'd like to request a motion," he said steady, "to table any punitive action against Mr. Voiles and formally recognize his financial contributions to the HOA. Nolan looked at the board members. "Do we have a second?" A woman near the end raised her hand. Seconded. They voted. Of the 7 board members, 5 raised their hands. Karen did not. Nolan nodded. Motion carries. Another rustle. A long exhale behind me. Nolan hesitated. Furthermore, until the conclusion of an internal audit, Ms. Boimel will step down as vice president. Karen didn't object. She gathered her folder, her slides, her composure. As she walked down the aisle, she passed me. She didn't apologize, but she paused, and she nodded just once. Tight, precise, real. It was enough. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply gathered my folder and stepped outside. The evening air had cooled. The sky carried the last lavender hues of dusk. Revi stood by the door, her arms crossed. She didn't say anything, just looked at me. Then the slide still projected faintly behind the glass. "Good tree," she said. "Best one I ever planted." She nodded and walked on. That night, back in my kitchen, I made tea instead of coffee. The storm had passed. The printer on the counter came to life, a soft hum, then the familiar mechanical click. Esri had sent something through the wireless print. I picked up the paper. It was a letter to Mr. Harlan Voiles. On behalf of the Elmcroft Pines Homeowners Association, we formally designate Parcel 12B as a memorial green space, henceforth referred to as Martha Grove. There was no signature, just the HOA seal embossed faintly at the bottom corner. I placed the paper beside the checkbook. The rain had stopped. The house was quiet, and the roots held strong beneath the soil. The sign went up 2 days later. A polished plank cedar smoothed its edges, beveled just enough to catch the morning light. The letters carved into it weren't loud or grand. Just a name, simple and certain, Martha Grove. The sun filtered through the new leaves, dappling the ground in fractured gold. The cypress tree stood straighter somehow, its roots more sure of their place. Wind stirred gently enough to flutter the corners of the laminated certificate that now sat inside my mailbox. Esri had sent me a text that morning. "You didn't win. You reminded them who they are." I didn't reply. Some messages don't need responses. I stepped into the backyard with the watering can and knelt beside the tree. The soil drank slowly, gratefully. I adjusted the small stones around the base so they caught the water instead of shedding it. A soft breeze rolled through, scented with mulch and something floral. A voice called from beyond the hedges. "Hope you don't mind company." Revi Maywell rounded the gate, a tray in her hands. She wore gloves that had seen more than one season, and her sneakers were dusted with potting soil. "Purple hyacinths," she said, holding out the tray. Martha always said they were hope in disguise. I nodded, voice caught somewhere too deep to speak. We planted in silence, her digging small pockets, me pressing bulbs into cool earth. The rhythm settled between us like old conversation. She didn't ask for direction. She knew where they belonged. When we were done, she leaned back on her heels. "Place looks better already." I looked at the patch of ground, soft, newly stirred, dotted with purple promise. The sign stood watchful above it all. Quiet. Present. Another voice interrupted the moment. A young man, maybe in his 30s, stood at the gate. He wore an HOA badge clipped to his polo shirt and held a rolled document. "Mr. Voiles." I nodded, standing slowly. He handed me the roll. "From the board. Certified Public Recognition Memorial Allocation 2023. His voice was measured, polite. The way someone speaks when they know they've inherited someone else's mess. I took it and unrolled it slowly. It was laminated, bordered with green ink. My name. Martha's name. Parcel 12B, officially designated as a community memorial site, signed by every board member, except Karen. I smiled anyway. The young man nodded and backed away, giving us space. Revi touched the corner of the certificate. She'd be proud. Not just of this, of how you carried it. I looked out at the yard. The chairs had been scrubbed clean. The old lemonade table stood again, legs fixed. A fresh pitcher weighted beads of condensation tracing paths like veins across the glass. Children laughed in the distance, playing by the sprinklers. A girl with curly hair and a skinned knee wandered toward the edge of my yard. She pointed at the sign. "Who's Martha?" I looked at her. I looked at the sign. Then I smiled. "Someone who still lives here." She tilted her head, nodded solemnly, then skipped back to her game. I didn't move for a while. I just sat, letting the light do its work, letting the hyacinth settle, letting the past stretch its legs into the future without asking for permission. I took down the camera facing the backyard. Didn't need it anymore. The screws came loose easier than I expected. Maybe the rain had softened them, or maybe it was just time. The little red light blinked once before going dark. I wrapped the wire, coiled it gently, and tucked the camera into the drawer beside the sink. Outside, the wind carried a whisper of cut grass and sun-warmed wood. The cypress tree, Martha's tree, stood taller than I remembered. The hyacinths had multiplied, spilling color along the base like a spilled box of crayons. Life, it seemed, had decided to stay. Esri sat on the porch step laptop, balanced on one knee, papers fanned beside her. "They finalized it," she said without looking up. "Residents can now appeal fines if they've contributed more than $2,000 a year. It's in the new charter." I sipped my coffee, let the steam blur the edges of my vision. She closed her laptop, slid it into her briefcase. "They've asked me to consult for the Regional Compliance Board," she added more softly. I didn't answer right away. She smiled, half proud, half wistful. "Don't worry, I'll still call on Sundays, and I'll send over tulip bulbs come fall." I nodded. "Make sure they're red." Martha hated yellow tulips. Esri stood, adjusted the strap on her shoulder, and reached for the envelope beside my mug. From the resident committee, they wanted it printed. I unfolded it slowly. Simple typeface, black ink on thick cream stock. "Your service has shaped us quietly. Thank you." No signatures, just the message. Just enough. I rose, walked inside, and slipped the letter beside the photo of Martha on the bookshelf. She was smiling in that picture lemonade glass, half-raised eyes squinting into sunlight. Next to it sat a napkin. The one she'd scrawled a recipe on during our first HOA picnic. Smudged ink, olive oil stain, and a note at the bottom. Add salt at the end, not the beginning, like forgiveness. I sat back down. The porch light buzzed softly above us. Amber glow casting long, easy shadows. Esri checked her watch. I should go. I didn't ask her to stay. She kissed my cheek, squeezed my hand, and stepped down the porch. The sound of her car door closing was soft. Engine quieter than I remembered. And then she was gone. I looked at the folded HOA sticker on the table. New design, sleeker font, less aggressive colors. I carried it out to the mailbox, peeled the backing, and pressed it into place. A simple click. Done. I did it on my own terms. No committee, no approval form, no email confirmation. Just me, a sticker, and a space that had finally settled. The wind rustled through the trees again. I closed the porch door behind me. The last light of spring dipped behind the cypress, casting a golden outline around its crown. The hyacinths swayed gently, and then, just as I reached for my mug, something landed on the porch step. A single purple petal from Revi's flowers. I bent to pick it up, held it for a moment. Let it go again. Still here. The porch light flickered once as I set my coffee down, and the wind curled past the mailbox where the new sticker sat, smooth and undisturbed. The hyacinths had begun to bloom again quietly without asking permission. Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel, it comes with paper trails, steady hands, and the silence of doing what's right when no one's watching. I didn't win a battle. I planted a reminder, and in doing so, I made space for something new to grow. Have you ever stood your ground not to prove a point, but to protect a memory? If this story stirred something in you, I'd be honored if you left a comment or shared your own. Maybe even subscribe if you feel this garden of stories has a place in your week.